X-Force number 14 is Chapter 17 in Marvel's Ten of Swords 22-part event, a continuation of a farcical tournament for the soul of Krakoa in the X-Men's homeland, with the mutants of Krakoa losing badly to their challengers from Arakko. Today I'll answer, does the comedic tone of this event work for Ten of Swords? What do Storm's actions here in this issue mean for her future? Theories and predictions for what's to come in X-Men and the Ten of Swords event. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 118. This review of X-Force number 14 will have some spoilers, and if you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing, and then commenting with your thoughts. All of these things help me out a great deal in expanding the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel's presence. Thanks everybody for your help. Writers Benjamin Percy, Gerry, Duggan. Art by Joshua Cassara. Colors by Guru-eFX. Letters by Joe Caramagna. Saturnine continues the random series of trials that have become the Tournament of Ten of Swords, including a dance-off and a puzzle competition, which again, literal items in my toddler's obstacle courses that I make up for him on the fly. Arakko maintains a comfortable lead throughout all of this as the tournament again enters the territory of farce. I did want to call out too, I totally called Pog Your Pog being a sword, not the individual, and having a little guy inside of him, which I don't have pictured here, but definitely knew that was coming. I will say Transformers More Than Meets the Eye did it better. Check out that series. It's very fun if you haven't read it, even if you don't like Transformers, honestly. And shouts also here to the art team supreme Joshua Cassara and Guru-eFX after a real MVP showcase in Wolverine number 7, the previous chapter. It's definitely just supposed to be a comedy at this point, Ten of Swords is that, you know? And in many ways, or for whatever reason, I've had a harder time making that adjustment from serious drama to comedy, you know? Like, Gorgon's going to blank that boulder is objectively funny, but there's something about the hard turn to total farce, starting with chapter 15, nearly 70% through the series, that just feels like absolute tonal whiplash. There are moments that feel like deeply memeified, like it's built for nothing more than sharing out of context on Twitter, and I don't know, maybe it's just me being an old man, but I kind of bristle at that. Part of my challenge, too, is that the stakes of this tournament were set up to feel enormous. You know, the mutants of Krakoa versus mutants of Arakko for the mutant nation and likely all of Earth 616 protection, yet the comical tone undercuts what initially felt very dire. On the level of shattering expectations, I do kind of applaud the turn, but I get why many readers were turned off and will continue to be. It's sudden and it is late in the event, and again, it's not just like, oh, like they're cracking jokes. That I have absolutely zero problem with and would find that bewildering, but it's more just like the entire tone of the tournament is very random and nonsensical, and intentionally so. Like, it's not like this is an accident, you know, so I get it, but it is a pill to swallow. Some people will love it, some will hate it, certainly. Nonetheless, heading into X-Force number 14, I was prepared at least for this turn, and I don't have a heart of stone, you know, when it comes to Gorgon and Magic solving jigsaw puzzles together. Like, I like those two captains hanging out. It's a funny montage. I will credit them that. Before we get to the feature challenges in this issue, there are reports of the fights from Major Domo to Mojo, okay, of Mojoverse. Now, there are two interesting threads here. First is that Mojo is getting reports on the activity of Krakoa versus Arakko and Otherworld. Considering the Spineless One has absolutely nothing to do with this event, that's just kind of weird in and of itself. But the real interesting piece is that these reports are submitted by Quadius, a character we've seen in those mysterious Ten of Swords prelude pages from Free Comic Book Day, later reused in Creation the Event Kickoff, a dimensional hopping Minotaur in service to Saturnine. What in the multiverse Quadius has to do with Mojo is anybody's guess, but that reference really caught my attention, and I'm very curious now what those connections might be. How the heck maybe Quadius is from the Mojoverse and has broken away. I would very much like to know that story. I don't know if there'll be space for it in this event because there are only 3 chapters left and they're all coming next week. So Saturnine unleashes the Fury in one of these challenges here, literally the Fury, on Captain Avalon, aka Brian Braddock, during his race through the Crooked Market with Redroot. the Doug Ramsey analog from Arakko. Seemingly just to mess with him and to give the Fury, I guess, something to do, since they are admittedly very, very cool. Again, from the Alan Moore, Alan Davis, Captain Britain run, which, boy, am I glad I reread and reviewed here on Krakin Krakoa, because it's clearly a favorite of the X-Men writers as they continue to reference it time and time again. Now, Saturnine, throughout this, she is still scheming to get Brian Braddock back under her thumb. To what end, I'm generally unclear. I mean, I would guess she feels she's cleared the path for him to resume his duties as Captain Britain and return a corps that would be loyal only to her. This sequence ends with Saturnine basically telling him, like, all right, you violated some protocols of the crooked market here. I'm going to leave you to the whims of Jim Jasper and the Fury unless you ask for my help, which is clearly like her blackmailing him back into her good graces. And to that end, we do get Jim Jaspers finally taking some action, lashing out at Redroot for breaking something in the crooked market, although again, all implications are he's playing by Saturnine's rules of Otherworld rather than him going rogue. Now, I teased a bunch of theories last week about reasons for the madness of this tournament, one of them being that maybe Mad Jim Jaspers was the one really pulling the strings and that he was the one pulling Saturnine's strings in particular, but more and more it's looking like the madness and kind of the chaos of this tournament and that farcical tone that I talked about is simply Saturnine's game. The Omniversal Magistrix is just toying with everyone, maybe stalling for time, I think is the best, like, practical reason I can think of here, is that she sees Arakko as probably the likely victors in a sword fight, so she is making the tournament weird but also making it look like they're definitely going to win to sort of appease them and keep them playing along as she schemes for herself and for her own purposes. That's the best rationale I can give to the absolute zaniness of this tournament. And we do get a reminder in the next challenge, which is probably the biggest one of the issue, of Storm and Logan's drinking contest in a previous comic. Now, basically what it says is that this liquid, this alcohol that they drank, it saps them of whatever their greatest power is. So in Wolverine's case, that was his healing factor, which we saw him lose in the fight he had to do against War, even though he still wound up coming up on top, and his regeneration factor did ultimately get the booze out of his system. But Storm also drank that, meaning she lost her powers. Now she's heading into a fight with death, and setting up a powerless Storm is cool because it's connected to several years of Claremont's Uncanny X-Men, including when Storm asserted leadership over the team ahead of Cyclops. And we've been reading a ton of this in the My Marvelous Year Reading Club, which I recommend you check out, the My Marvelous Year Reading Club and podcast. You can do so at mymarvelousyear.com. But this 80s era, Storm is powerless almost as much as she has powers throughout that entire stretch. It's very interesting. So here we have quote-unquote powerless Storm, but she's still awesome, right? This is why it's so cool and such a great moment for Storm, because she still beats Death in a sword fight, leaves him bleeding to the zombie hordes of Sevalith. Now, Storm leaving him there for the hordes of Sevalith, we've seen on her tarot card previously, Storm kind of riding a horse and leading what looked like a zombie horde. I think a turn here of Storm as the Queen of Sevalith would be cool as hell. Get her into sort of goddess mode, leading an entire otherworld realm of zombie creatures. That would be absolutely fascinating. Metaphorically, too, the death of Death here, at least it appears to be, also connects thematically to much of what we've seen from Krakoa throughout this era of comics, and even Immortal Hulk across Marvel, right? This idea of death is no longer the end for these characters, and frankly, it hasn't been for a long time in comics, but using things like resurrection in the X-Men world and in Krakoa to really sort of conquer that, Storm is doing that quite literally here with Apocalypse's Horsemen of Death. I'll call out here, too, that, the family of Apocalypse has proven rather disappointing. War lost a hand, Death seems to have been eaten, and Summoner was killed by Wolverine. I have to think this is cementing the transition Apocalypse will have to make, cleaving his old family and forming a new one with Krakoa. But nonetheless, pretty poor performance from Genesis's offspring, which I can't imagine will be in her head since she's corrupted by the Annihilation Helm, but we'll see. I mean, in conclusion, I don't think these are badly executed comics by any measure, but there's no tension or suspense with the tournament itself, which makes this stretch of Ten of Swords a kind of a real test of endurance. You definitely have to switch gears quite rapidly and for a stretch. So not only is it a farce when I expected a drama, but it's a rigged farce, because Saturnine is giving all the points to Arakko. So there's not really, her keeping score is just, it's irrelevant, right? It's just it's a ping pong match to 21 where one person is way better than the other. another, and it's just kind of like you're just playing it out to the end. I mean, I ended this issue of X-Force really only waiting for the shoe to drop to reveal what the point of the farce is, but having read all 3 chapters released today before last week's final 3 chapters in the entire event, or before next week, final 3 chapters, and I'll be reviewing the other 2 chapters that came out today on Krakin Krakoa, but I'm less convinced than ever that there is another shoe to drop. Like, I don't actually think that's coming anymore. We're here at the end. This is what Ten of Swords is. Love it or hate it. Like, this is Saturnyne's game. I think the theories about, okay, maybe it's Mad Jim Jaspers, maybe it's a different multiversal version of Saturnine. I'm still deeply invested in, like, Saturnyne's story. You know, how did she accumulate this much power? What happened to her after Secret Wars? Because she died. You know, she died in the incursions with Captain Britain Corps. Captain Britain's Corps is still gone, but she's here, more powerful than ever. So, like, that's a story I want to see told. But I don't think there's going to be a big surprise or a big shoe to drop. I think it's just like, this is the tournament. It was building to this moment, and now it's going to set up, I'll talk about this in Cable, kind of like one ultimate battle. So the Krakoan for this issue says next is a Fool's Gamble. That's going to take us to Hellions, which is, well, I'll talk about it. I will talk about it next in the next episode of Krakin Krakoa. So stay tuned for that. Again, you can find a link to the playlist for all Krakin Krakoa videos and specifically all 10 of Swords coverage. I have those links for all those playlists in the show notes, so check that out there. Thanks everybody for listening. If you have thoughts on the comments or on the comics, definitely let me know in the comments. I want to hear theories, ideas, just I guess 2 reactions to what this event is now. I know last week was definitely controversial, and a lot of people were pretty furious. A lot of people were pleasantly surprised. So let me know in the comments. I'm curious as well. Let's hear it. Also, for everybody who's supporting Comic Book Herald, thanks so much over on patreon.com/comicbookherald. Thanks Ron Paul Kirkley, Jesse W., Professor Pride, Steve Brennan, Cole Weathers, Martin Lopez, Chris Seidger, Brent Bowser, Professor X3769, and PD Applesteed for your generous support in the mysterious benefactors tier. I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald, pretty much anywhere on social. Look for the best comics ever and My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me. Otherwise, I will be back here shortly with coverage of Hellions number 6. That will be Krakin Krakoa. What are we on now? Number 119 coming next. So thanks everybody for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.